Hello ladies and gents, and welcome back to the 2 for 1 podcast,
where you get two of us for the price of one.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Becky, and today we're going to talk about all the different paths into higher education and what different career opportunities are out there to get you where you want to go in life. So one of the options to get into higher education is to go to university, which I personally decided to do. So I, as I think we mentioned in a previous episode, went to Leeds University to study accounting and finance. I'd sort of decided that accountancy was sort of the path I wanted to choose, and there was the option of going into to uni or to get an apprenticeship straight from school at an accountancy firm. So obviously I had to weigh out which one was going to be better, not necessarily career wise because you'd get to the same place eventually, but obviously deciding on uni life or whether to just start earning. So I decided I wanted uni life and the 36 grand debt, but we won't go into that right now. But yeah, so that's one of the options. So I think if we just go into some pros and cons of uni, which I've kind of already summarised, but
I mean, the biggest thing that you've already kind of said that put me off university, because I didn't go, was the debt at the end of it.
Yeah.
That is something that put me off. And I think if you're like me, I wasn't 100% on a course, then I was kind of a bit like, why would I spend all this money to do something that I don't even really particularly want to do? I'm just going there. So for me, that was the biggest con, and that's what put me off.
Yeah, because the thing is, it isn't just the debt that you rack up for the uni fees. There's obviously you get your student loan as well, which is added on, but that doesn't cover anywhere near the costs that you've got. So then either you getting a job or your parents giving you money.
Yeah,
there's a lot more money to it than just the student loan, and it's quite it's shocking when you actually in it and you're like, oh gosh.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And it's a lot of pressure when you've been living with your parents your whole life. The only responsibility that you've had is really to turn up to school on time, and then all of a sudden you're sort of catapulted into complete independent living. It is quite stressful, I think.
Yeah, because there's only a few people that stay living at home and go to a uni nearby, which obviously you could do, but I wanted the proper uni experience and move away. So obviously you got all the rent costs onto that, and it's just.
But then on the flip side, that's kind of like a pro, isn't it? You get to move away, you get to sort of discover yourself. So you went to Leeds. Was there any kind of a particular attraction of why you wanted to go to Leeds?
Not particularly. I'd gone around all the unis and to view them and look at the courses and stuff, and I just loved the campus. I was just there, and I was I can see myself being here. Whereas the others, I was just sort of a bit I'm not a fan. But that one I was I like it.
Yeah.
So that was literally it. There was no previous draw to Leeds for any reason.
You could just imagine yourself studying and living there. Basically.
Yeah.
So in terms of, obviously you moved to Leeds, which is quite a way away, it's not local to ourselves. How did you find that? How did you find moving, not just going to another school somewhere, but uprooting and moving to a completely new city? How was that? Was it easy to make friends, easy to meet people?
I think it's relatively easy to make friends. Obviously everyone's in the same boat as you, they've all just moved away from home. Obviously you've got your flatmates that you're sort of thrown in with, and then you've obviously got your course mates, who obviously you spend most of the time with because you're doing lectures, seminars, all these words bringing back memories, not all good. And then obviously, like if you do any group work or if you do like the homework, whatever together, like in the library or whatever, you're like, oh, let's, you know, do it together, whatever. So you are sort of thrown into it. And I feel like it's a different kind of vibe of getting to know people, because you know everybody's in the same situation. It's a lot easier to make friends than just about, if that makes sense. Not necessarily at work, because that's a similar sort of situation.
Yeah.
But then obviously with the course, you've obviously got a similar sort of interest, and like you both, well, you all want to go into the same sort of career. So there is always that sort of starting point, because we kind of talked about this in the dating apps thing, obviously not talking about dating, but yeah, having a common interest is just laughing because I'm just done. Having a common interest like breaks the ice and makes it a lot easier to like make conversation to start with. So I think that's quite nice. And then obviously having people doing the same course as you at uni means that when you know, move on to like your jobs in the real world, you then have a network of people, like other people who have the same interests and you're friends with. So I have a few friends still from uni who like work in the same obviously industry, but at different companies in different cities, and having that network like around the country like can be quite important in your career. So it definitely helps build up like a sort of little network of accountancy friends.
Definitely. And I think from a professional side of things as well, that's like impressive. I think that you know people from like different firms, and like you've got your eye on the ball from like different companies, so you're sort of like improving like your professional development because you know what's going on in different firms as well. And that's something that you could take back to your manager and say, oh, I know one of my friends works at this firm in London and they've started doing this. Like, what if we tried that? So yeah, that's only beneficial.
Yeah. And I think uni in general looks good to employers because you did have to take that massive step, put yourself out of your comfort zone, and obviously come out the other side, and it like sort of shows something to your employer. Obviously it depends as well how you do from uni, but yeah, there's a lot of transferable skills that you can like take into your career.
Yeah. And you know, when you apply for a job and you say, oh, like I went to Leeds and I studied like accountancy and finance, do you have to like disclose what you got?
If they're asking for a specific grade, then yes. But yeah, so usually, yeah, you disclose what grade you've got, mainly because they do care what grade you got.
So the only thing as well, when I said before that I got put off from a degree because I wasn't fully invested, was the time commitment. So obviously most bachelor degrees are over 3 years. Is this something that you struggled with or know someone that struggled with?
So obviously 3 years when you sign up to it when you're like 18 doesn't feel like a long time. But when I was about a year and a half into the course, I think that's when I was sort of like, I'd be happy to stop. I think just because, like, obviously I carried on because I was then so deep into it that there was no point stopping. But like the difficulty of the course didn't really warrant the like uni life anymore. Yeah, because I think uni life is a sort of novelty for the first like year and a half, and then as your like assignments and stuff get harder, the less you can actually do uni life, and then you go out like once a week or twice a week, whatever. But it's like I could just do this with a job. And like I've got all these exams and all these assignments to do that like I don't really want to be doing, and they're just difficult, and like it's that's the kind of, that's like the big commitment that you sign up for but don't necessarily take into consideration. Like 3 years isn't really a long time in the grand scheme of things, but 3 years of education, when you've already done 20 years of education, feels like a long time when you're in it, I think.
Okay, so as well as studying, obviously, like to break up the 3 years, did you do anything outside of your course, like extracurricular activities or anything like that?
Yeah, so like there was so many like options to do like clubs and stuff, which I suppose you wouldn't get like if you got a job straight from school. But I think like that's amazing. Obviously, if you've already got an interest, you can carry it on. And if you like want to start a new interest, like the options there, like there was so many like things you wouldn't even think of. Like I think brewery was one of them. Like it was literally just a society to like brew beer.
Oh my goodness.
Like how ridiculous is that? But so like it was really good for that. But then obviously trying to fit that in, because so first year of uni, you're a lot more quiet in your like course. So you can take on all these things, all these nights out, all these clubs and sort of like manage it. But then as soon as the work like ramps up, your time management skills have to get a lot more precise, which I suppose is a good lesson to learn and is good for like when you do get a job. But it's just trying to fit, like depending on what you sign up for, it's hard to fit it all in. So I'd done rowing at school, or at sixth form, should I say. So I carried that on into uni. But the way that the rowing club worked was we had to go down to the river first thing in the morning so that we were back for like 8:30 so people could go to 9 a.m. lectures. So that meant that I had to wake up at like 5 a.m. to get down to the river by 6 or 5:30, 6, do like 2 hours of training, get back to uni and then like do a full day of work. And I was just like, oh, this is hard. Because then that takes away obviously the uni life of nights out and stuff, because any night before a rowing practice, like I needed to be in bed by 9 o'clock because, 9 hours sleep me. That's not even 9 hours, can't even do maths. But so it's great that the option's there, definitely. And it does help you get through those 3 years, because it does definitely break up the like assignments course side of it. But
yeah,
managing.
I was gonna say, like rowing especially as well, it's not like an easy like club to do, is it? Like it's like physically draining, so that probably like wipe you out for a couple of hours as well. I would not be going to 9 a.m. lecture after rowing for 2 hours and being up at 5, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, the thing was though with that, it was annoying when you didn't have a 9 a.m. lecture, because it's like I didn't need to be that up that early.
Yeah.
Obviously, like you did, because you're obviously in a boat with other people who might. So sometimes I would literally just go home and have like a sleep until like my 10 or 11 a.m. lecture. It's just like, but then like because of that, it was like I'd wasted some of the day. Like I could have been in the library studying or doing some homework or something, but I was just asleep because I'd been up so early instead.
Yeah.
So.
And like you said, in your first year, you probably thought, I've got all this time to take stuff on. And then coming second and third year, you've not got the time, but maybe you feel like guilty, like stepping away from it and saying, I don't really want to do this anymore.
Yeah. So that like hour or two that I could have had a nap in first year, I then had to do like coursework for assignments. And then I was just like drained instead.
Yeah.
So. But, I don't think I'm the best at time management. That's probably why. But, yeah, it is definitely a good, what am I trying to say, like benefit to going to uni, is having that option. Obviously, you have to pay for the clubs and stuff like that, but.
And I think that's a good thing to put on your CV afterwards as well, because I feel like I struggle when, employers ask for like hobbies and interests, but something like that is like a really good one to put down.
Yeah, rather than just like, I like shopping.
It's literally me, like shopping, socialising. They tell you not to put that, don't they?
You need a society or a club that like you do that in.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. So we touched on this a little bit before, but I've just had a look and it says that 2/3 of students think that it's a massive change university than going to school, and maybe it was a bit of a shock to the system. And maybe this explains why. I mean, I've heard of, you know, a few people dropping out in like the first few weeks is quite common. Is this something that you found? Did you find it was like a lot different, or did you know anyone who dropped out because it was too different?
Well, I didn't know anyone that has dropped out, but it is very different. So obviously the work is a lot harder than like GCSEs and A-levels that you do at school. So obviously that's like a big step up, alongside like moving away from home, potentially having to do your own washing of clothes, like living on your own, sorting your own life out, you know, like ringing the doctors, stuff like that you sort of take for granted when you're at school, that your parents just do for you, and then you've got to sort of do it on your own. But then also, if you do a course that you haven't done before, so I had no experience with accountancy at all before going to uni, so being thrown into obviously uni level accounting, I was just like, oh my god. So like I can see why it would be very overwhelming for a lot of people. And I do think it depends, not necessarily what your background is, but maybe what school you went to, how much of a change it was. So like for my brother, for example, the school he went to was very like hand-holdy. So he's very bright, but he needs to be like forced to do his work, and then he's really good at it. But when he comes to uni, and nobody, like the lecturers don't really care if you do the work. Like if you fail uni, that's fine, they still get paid. So they don't care as much as school do how you do. So with nobody holding his hand, he just like dossed around and did nothing, and then obviously struggled when it came to the exams. So in that sense, I think depending on how you, like what school you've been to, I don't know why I said that weird, depending on what school you've been to and how you're used to your education being, can have a massive impact on how you do. Because I think I've always been very independent, like I wanted to do well, so I would like force myself to try and, you know, revise, whereas he would just be like, I'm clever, it's fine. Yeah. And obviously kicked him in the teeth when he went to uni because he didn't know what he was doing. But yeah, so I think it is definitely a big shock.
Yeah, but also down to the person.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing with like which school you've come from, I definitely had this as well, but certain schools don't necessarily give all the options of like uni and apprenticeships and stuff. They literally, it's sort of drilled into you that uni is the only option that you should go to. So like my brother, for example, he probably should have gone and done an apprenticeship, because he'd have been like working, learning on the job, and that would have been like how he learned. Whereas the school was sort of just like, oh, what uni are you applying to? What are you going to study? Like no one said like, oh, well, you can go and do an engineering apprenticeship. Like it was like, what uni are you going to do? No, what uni are you going to? So that's the other, maybe the other thing is someone who's not necessarily suited to uni has maybe been forced to go by like parents and teachers, and then they're just like, oh my god, when they get there.
Yeah.
So talking about apprenticeships versus uni, was segueing quite nicely into the apprenticeships portion. So you did an apprenticeship, didn't you, Sarah?
I
like
did.
What apprenticeship did you do, and like how does it work? Stuff
So
like that.
I did a business admin and customer service apprenticeship, levels 2 and 3, which is the equivalent of a GCSE level 2 and an A level 3. And so what you were just saying then is like pretty much how it happened for me. So my high school was very much like you said, what university you go into. So I was all ready basically to go to a university in Bath to do English and creative writing, because I was really good at English. And basically at the time, and I still watch, I don't know what I'm saying at the time, but I was watching Sex and the City, and I thought I was going to be Carrie Bradshaw and I was going to have my own column. And so that's why I was going to go to Bath to do English and creative writing, because that's what I wanted to do. Anyway, I went to sixth form college. I did get the grades to stay on at the sixth form at my high school, but I just decided I wanted a bit of a change. So I went to a local sixth form college, and there so after my first year, I did A levels, and I did English, psychology, sociology, and statistics. And English was the only like subject that I was passing. I was basically failing everything else. And it was difficult because in lessons I would like get the questions right, but and even like the coursework side of it I was quite good at, but like the exams I was just so bad at. Like I've just never been an exam person. No. So I had a meeting with like a careers advisor, and she sat me down and she said like, have you never considered an apprenticeship? And I was literally like, apprenticeships, but they're for people who aren't smart. Like, why would I do one of them? Because that's literally what I was told, subliminally through my high school experience. That was basically like, you don't do one of them because you're smart. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it's got a bad stigma to it.
It has got a really bad stigma.
Schools, it's bad.
So I was like, no. I was like, I've just never considered it. She was like, I really think you should look. And just have a look online at the information and see what you think. So I had a look. And also, it probably doesn't help, I come from like a very academic family. Like all of my family have been to university. Some have got like masters. So I kind of didn't want to be like the only one who hadn't been to university. I didn't want to like miss out. But anyway, I looked online and got some information. And I was like, why would nobody not do this?
Yeah.
So I applied for like a few. I got a few interviews, and then I accepted the one that I really wanted to do, which was at a law firm. And I started there in the finance department as an apprentice. And I honestly loved it, because it was completely different to how I've ever learned before. Like, I never thought you could get a qualification and learn whilst on a job. Like, I just never thought you'd be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it kind of guided me through what I wanted to do. So very quickly it was picked up that I'm like quite good at speaking to people. So then I moved from that to like the receptionist kind of side of things. But obviously was kept on in the same company. So I think when you're an apprentice, you kind of nurtured a bit more. Like, they look for what you're good at and then want to keep you in the business if you're good, but then put you in like a role that's more suited for you. So once you've got that foot through the door and they like you, then they kind of want to keep you. So it's a lot easier to like get into different positions.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is if you join a business, they obviously have the different departments that you can have the experience in.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you go to uni, you pick a course and that's the course you do. Like, there's no option to, try different things.
To move around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously I stayed there for quite a while, I stayed in that position for quite a while. But when you were saying as well before about how like you get the uni experience, but obviously in like, especially your second and your third year, you've got a lot more to do. Well, I had friends that were at uni when I was at work, and honestly, I was out more than they were.
Really?
Like, I was out like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like on a weekly basis. And they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't come out tonight. And also because, I mean, my apprenticeship wage wasn't great, but I didn't have to pay for like accommodation or anything. So
Yeah.
compared to them, I was like rolling in it a little bit. Like,
Yeah. And it's a wage rather than a debt.
Yeah.
Like, at least somebody's giving you money.
Yeah.
It's not you paying £9,000 for uni that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's another thing, like the course is like usually like government funded, or it's partially government funded and then the rest is funded by your employer. So you're getting free training.
Yeah.
So that's what's good about it really. And then you get paid for doing it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So another good thing about having an apprenticeship is, for me, obviously because the wage wasn't that great, I couldn't afford to go on holiday necessarily like in school holidays.
Yeah.
So a good thing for me was I normally went away in like October. Obviously quite a lot of my friends would like be back at university.
Yeah.
But because I could book my holidays whenever, obviously I could go in October when it was a bit cheaper. And I had just a bit more flexibility really, obviously, around that, because obviously you're a paid employee, so it's not like you have to be in for certain dates like you are with school or university.
So I assume you got paid for those holidays, like paid holidays.
Yeah, they were paid holidays. And another good thing that we got was that my pension contributions are from when I was 17.
Oh yeah.
So I've already got like, not a substantial, but like a good pension part. Because the way pensions work as well is also how long you've had them, not necessarily how much you put in. So there's been like case studies and stuff before that I've heard of where it's been like a woman's been working since she was 17 and her husband started working when he was 25 and he was putting like double the amount in, but she still came out with like the bigger pension.
Yeah.
Which I don't really understand the logic behind that, but apparently that's like the algorithm of how it works.
Right. I don't really know how they work, to be honest.
Me neither. My dad's like the expert on pensions, so I just leave it to him. He like contacts Scottish widows for me, deals with them. Another really good thing, I know you mentioned this a bit before when you were talking about university, is like the transferable skills. So I learned a lot in my apprenticeship about like health and safety, about like customer service skills. Obviously that's what my apprenticeship was in, but on the job training as well. And we even did training around like GDPR and anti-money laundering because we handle cash. So even if I was going for a job in a completely different sector, then all of that is still relevant and it's really good to like put on your CV.
Yeah.
So that was really good.
And I suppose, I suppose because as well you could sort of have experience in the different departments within the firm.
Yeah.
You then pick up like even just nuggets of like knowledge. So like a little bit from the finance department, a little bit from the reception of like how to speak to people or like how to speak to different kinds of people in a different way. And like all those things, not necessarily like they are transferable skills, but they are just like a broad range of knowledge that you can like take forward into like other things.
Definitely. And I think like for my most recent job interview, they asked me to give an example of like when you would like ignore GDPR like on purpose basically because it was like required to do so. And I actually had an example that I used that was from when I was on my apprenticeship. So I said, and they asked me when it was, and I was like, oh, it was on my apprenticeship. And they were like, wow, that's really good that you got that training so early on and knew to do that. And I'm like, yeah, it's just always been ingrained in me because I did have that training so early on.
Yeah.
So I think that comes across really well as well. Like, it shows that you've always done it because your employer will make sure that you know, especially like you said, if you're dealing with finance or customers, you've just got to know that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
The only thing with that though is that because it is a completely different like style of learning. So like I said, I went from sixth form college. My sixth form college wasn't too dissimilar from my high school, if I'm being honest. You know, I said that they didn't necessarily push university like my high school did, but the learning style was pretty much the same. Going from that to a work setting, I did struggle with a little bit to begin with, because to begin with, I was sort of like asking too much. So I was like, didn't want someone to hold my hand as such, but didn't want to just assume that I could go and do things. Like, for instance, even stuff like going on your dinner, I'd be like, can I go on my dinner? And they're like, you don't need to ask, like, you can just go.
Yeah.
So it is a completely different environment, so that it can be a big step. The other thing is, after the first year of your apprenticeship, some people it's 18 months, depending on how long it takes to complete. Whoever takes you on is not contractually obliged to keep you on. If they don't like you after that, the apprenticeship period, they can quite easily get rid of you. So it's not good job security in that sense. But if they do like you and you've been an apprentice with them, from my experience, they'll want you to do better and they'll want to see you progress more. And like I said, I did a level 2 and I went on to do a level 3, and if I would have stayed at the company longer, I could have even done a level 4, which is like a management style training, and that's the equivalent of like a degree basically. So for quite a few years. So it does have like really, really good pros, but then like the cons are like dramatically at the other end of the scale.
So I know you said before about apprenticeships being funded by the government. So do all apprenticeships get funded by the government, or does it depend like what you're doing, who you're like employed with and stuff like that?
Yeah, so as far as I know, there's like an eligibility check that you can do on the government website. Obviously, it depends on who your employer is and if they're registered with the apprenticeship scheme.
Right.
There's also factors that you need to consider. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think if you're over the age of 25, then you're not eligible. And if you have already completed your A levels, like I said, I only like did half of my A levels, and then dropped out when I was 17. But if you complete your A levels, then you're not eligible. Obviously, because the course that you're doing needs to be like the highest level that you've ever done, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, you wouldn't be eligible for that either, but there is an eligibility check on the government website, and I would advise anybody, if they're unsure, to contact their employer who is offering the apprenticeship, and they can always query it at their end with their HR department as well. So following university or an apprenticeship, the next question is, would you want to be employed by somebody else, or would you want to start and run your own business? Now again, there's pros and cons to both of these. Myself, I've always worked for someone else. I have always had that, I don't want to say lack of responsibility, but I've never had to deal with the demanding hours and finance side of things that people who do own their own business have to go through. But we do have a bit of knowledge on both sides, so we're going to look into that now. As I've just mentioned there, one of the biggest things around owning your own business is the risk side of it. Now, I don't know how true this is, but you might be able to shed some light on this, Becky, but I heard that the majority, there was a percentage, but it was like the majority of startups don't make a profit for like the first 5 years.
I'm not fully sure on the percentages, but I think that is right. I think there's a certain percentage of businesses that just like stop completely after the first year because they've not made a profit and they can't continue going. But there is definitely it's definitely difficult to make a profit in the first few years of the business. I'm not sure on the percentage either, but it is quite high, and people don't, I think, necessarily know that.
Yeah, it must be hard as well, because I imagine when you first set up a business, you know, especially if you have a premises somewhere. For instance, if I was setting up a clothes shop, then a lot of the cost would be at the beginning as well. So you wouldn't necessarily get like a lot of business, because, you know, maybe a lot of people won't know about you. But you'd have to fork out for all the stock for the premises. There's usually like a big deposit that needs going down at the start, just as like if you were renting a residential place as well as like a commercial, like they usually request like a certain amount of months in advance. So I think that would be tricky.
I definitely think there's some costs, or a lot of costs, that people don't consider when starting like a business. Like, obviously there's certain costs that are just going to be fixed. I'm bringing my accounting knowledge in now, sorry, but there's obviously some costs that are fixed, so no matter how much you sell, you're going to have to pay for like rent, electricity, water, if you've got staff, their wages, the national insurance and the tax on that, and all that kind of stuff. So the only actual like variable costs that you can have are like the stock. So if you don't sell much, then obviously you don't buy more of that, but you have got those constant costs that people don't necessarily think about, like an electricity bill. Like, you wouldn't think about that. You'd think, oh, I can buy this stock, sell it for this, that's how much profit I'll make. And it's like, it's not how it works.
Not that straightforward.
No.
Obviously, with that kind of issue of, you know, not realising how much like stock you've got in terms of profit with the fixed costs, I imagine that's how cash flow issues come up. Like, you could say, right, I know, for instance, if it's back to my analogy of having like a clothes shop, it's prom season next month. So I know that I'm going to make, I don't know, £10,000 from the dresses that I'm going to sell. However, I can't pay my electricity bill this month.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't have the prom dresses in stock, and then you've like got to buy them before you can sell them, if you don't have the cash in the bank to be able to buy them, you then can't make the money.
No.
So it's like, there are definitely, see, there's like the fixed costs and stuff as well, and then obviously like seasonality, and people don't always consider that.
No.
I don't think. They don't think of like the bigger picture when they start their business. They just think, this is how much I can make on each piece of clothing, let's go for it. And it's just like, you need to consider things. Like in winter, for example, you'll probably make more money because you'll be selling like coats, boots, stuff like that. Whereas in summer, when clothes are a lot lighter and a lot cheaper, like the profit margin is probably a lot less.
Yeah. But then that works both ways as well, because say in winter and Christmas, when you're probably making up a lot more money but are a lot more busier, so you might have to like take on extra staff. Those periods.
But then depending on how you employ them, you might then have to pay them in the summer. When you're not busy.
That makes sense. But I think I'm far too naive to actually own my own business. I think I'd be one of those people who would genuinely just think, right, I've bought these dresses, I've sold them for that much, I've got all this money, and then someone will come along and be like, no, you haven't. Probably you, as my accountant. No, Sarah, that money isn't yours. I am going to need you to return the Louis Vuitton bag.
I definitely used to think like that. I was like, oh, I'm going to start up my own business, I'm going to make loads of money. But having like that, all the exposure to it, I know exactly how people fall down in making those decisions. Like, I've said a couple of times, like at work, like some people just shouldn't start a business because they have no clue what's going on. Like, they don't even know what's going on inside their own business, let alone like the figures and the costs and stuff as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? And I feel like, as hypocritical as it is, I would have been like that if I'd started a business from school. But now I know, I'm like, I can't own a business. I will spend all the money and not make any sales.
Okay, so on the topic of costs, obviously a big cost in any business is salaries for employees. And I know Molly May mentioned recently that for her tanning business Filter, she doesn't actually take a salary because she wants the business to do really well and succeed. But obviously she still needs to pay salaries out for her, don't say workers, but for her staff.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, you know, with your accountancy background, have you come across much of how much salaries can impact on, obviously, profits and loss?
Yeah. I mean, salaries can quickly add up, obviously, especially with minimum wage. If people have like contracted hours, that can quickly like add up. But I think with Molly May as well, because she can afford to do that, because she has obviously other income, she can like not take money. Whereas some people who set up businesses as their income obviously have to try and find money for their staff and money for them to be able to like pay their personal bills and stuff.
Yeah.
So even if they take like as minimal amount as possible, like some people obviously do have to take some sort of salary. So there's definitely a lot more security, I think, being an employee.
Yeah.
Because you have your agreed salary and that gets paid if you're working, obviously.
I was just going to say, on the flip side to that, as an employee, if you're working at a company and the business that you're working for has done really, really well, and you feel like you've contributed to that in some way over the past year, and you don't get a bonus that year, you only get your agreed salary, there's like not much you can do about it. Whereas if you own that business, then you can obviously like take dividends, and you have a bit more control over that.
Yeah, you can definitely make the financial decisions when it does well.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's like a pro and con of each. If the business is doing well, being the owner of the business is better. But obviously, when the business is doing badly, you have a lot more security being an employee of it.
Definitely.
And I think, sort of leading on from that, as an owner of a business, when you set up a business, you kind of sign away your time to put in as many hours as needs be. So like as an employee, you have like a contracted amount of hours. If you work overtime, technically you should be paid. I don't think they can expect you to work overtime unless it's in your contract where you work overtime for free. But as an owner, you sort of signed up to put in all the hours because it's like your business, so it's only benefiting yourself when you're doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I've been an employee in companies before where I've done overtime for free with the mindset of, if I do this, then I will go further because the company will recognise that I'm putting the work in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's been like unofficial overtime because I've thought, right, I'm going to do this, and then they'll see how much time I'm putting in and think, oh, she's doing so well. She clearly wants to go far. So I feel like if you've got your own, I don't want to say motivation for it, but you've got your own reasons for doing it, then do it. But I completely agree, like you can't be expected to work for more hours than you're contracted to.
Yeah, but then occasionally when something needs doing, obviously they'll look at you and be like, wow, she like really did put the extra effort in when it needed to, when we needed it. Oh my god.
No, exactly. And also I think that's a good thing to, you might not get the overtime straight away, but when it comes to like pay rises or bonuses, if you want to put yourself forward for one, then that's a good reason to say, you can say, I think I deserve a pay rise this year because I worked all this overtime and didn't claim for it.
Yeah, or a promotion. Like if there's two people like doing the same job and one of them's putting in a lot more effort, then who are they really going to look to for the higher up position?
Definitely. Following on from that, one of the biggest issues that a lot of people who are employees have that I've come across is that they don't feel like their morals and values are reflected through a company. Obviously, when you become an employee and a staff member within a company, you have to reflect the company's values. And if they're not your own, then sometimes that can leave you feeling a little bit dissatisfied. Whereas if you're the employer of that company, then obviously the company is going to reflect who you are. And you can obviously, if you're not happy with them or your values start to change as time progresses, then obviously you can change the business model. Whereas if you're an employee, then you don't have that same control. That's something that I've experienced where I felt like I haven't been able to help people enough. I'm a very caring person, and I think sometimes I was often felt dissatisfied that I couldn't help people enough in a previous job. But that was the business. If we couldn't help, we couldn't help. So I think that's something I've struggled with in the past, and I know quite a few people have when they've worked for a company that they don't feel fits them as a person.
Yeah. On the sort of flip side of that, though, it's kind of like, as an employee, although you might not agree with the company's policies and stuff, you don't owe them like much of a duty of care. Like, you, as an employee, you sort of looking out for yourself, so you're doing your job well so that they keep you on, so that you have a salary. Whereas if you disagreed that much that you then like looked for another job and left, like you sort of, that's it. Like that, you've got no ties to the company. As long as you do your like notice period and do everything within your contract legally and stuff, you've got no responsibility to them. Whereas as an employer, you've obviously got to look after yourself, and you've got to look after your employees and make sure they're happy so that they don't want to leave. So I think as an employer, it's probably a good idea to make sure your staff are happy and are like, do agree with the morals of the company and stuff like that. Just so you actually have happy staff, because I think that makes a big difference with how successful a business is if you have happy staff. So like you said, if you don't agree with, like if you couldn't help them as much as you wanted to, then you just feel a bit like, oh, like mainly because of the business's morals and stuff. But it's just like, you would potentially then leave. I mean, I assume you did leave, you got a different job now. And they were like, oh no, like now we've got to find someone else.
Yeah.
So it's just like, they do have a duty to look after their staff and make sure that they are happy.
Definitely. I think if you look after your staff and you're really good to your staff, then that will be reciprocated. And
Yes.
I think if you don't treat your staff really well, then they'll won't want to work hard and, you know, won't do the best that they can do.
I just have a sudden urge to laugh.
God, don't set me off, please.
Just the outro.
Ready? So next week, join us for an episode all about girl talk. And we'll be discussing topics that you might not want to discuss with your mum and dad, but think of us as your big sisters, and we will give you any help and advice that you need around anything girl talk related.
Yeah, make sure you click the subscribe button down below and the bell icon to make sure you get notified when we post that video. If you liked this video, click the like button and comment down below if you went to uni, did an apprenticeship, or whether you work for yourself or whether you work for someone else. Thanks for watching. Bye.